Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Guru Manthan. Guru Manthan is being hosted by the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, whose mission is to develop human and social capital to build a resurgent India. This particular platform, that is the Guru Manthan, is aimed at creating a platform for teachers to discuss, debate, and learn about diverse perspectives and practices in the field of education from across the world. This was started in August and is aimed to be a series of 50 lectures over the last 6 months, and we are now into the seventh month. We have had the who's who of in the field of education with us. We have had Mr. Professor M.K. Sridhar, Mr. Anurag Beher, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, Mr. Anil Swarup, who was the former MHRD secretary. Professor Annamalai spoke about language. We have Dr. Praveen Kumar from the state of Telangana. Then Professor Katimani, Mr. Satish. We had Professor D.P. Giridhar talking about learning outcomes. And in the last month, we had discussions about working with gifted children and problem-based learning and so on. So today we have with us a very interesting speaker, Dr. Shailesh Shirali. He is the director of the Sahyadri School of the Krishnamurti Foundation, India. And he's also the chief editor of the At Right Angles periodical in the field of mathematical maths education, brought out by the Azim Premji Foundation. After his Ph.D. from the University of Texas at Dallas, he moved to India. He joined the Rishi Valley School in the mid-1980s, and he's been with the Krishnamurti schools ever since. He was also awarded the National Award for Teachers in 2003, and he has been very closely associated with the Mathematical Olympiad movement in India right from its inception times. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir, and we look forward to hearing from you. As always, we will have a 25 to 30-minute opening remarks from you, followed by a Q&A session, and then we will try to wind up roughly at around 8 o'clock with closing remarks from your side. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I am honored to be given this opportunity to talk to all of you. And just to introduce the topic, I'm going to be looking at education in a slightly different way. I'm not going to be focusing so much on the nitty-gritties of education, on how to address specific problems that we encounter. But I'm going to ask this question of the why of school education. Why do we have education at all? And is education really doing what it sets out to do? So that's going to be the theme of the talk. And the actual title of the talk is The Role of a Teacher in School. What is the actual role of a teacher? So I'll just share my presentation and we'll start. So I hope it is visible to all.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, first of all, what is the purpose of education? Until we ask that question and are quite clear of the answer, we will really not be able to move. After all, is it to meet the demands of industry and government, basically to populate the workplace? Is it to help students become engaged citizens, whether socially or culturally or intellectually or in terms of their talents? Is it to help individual students advance on their career paths by means of developing their skills and their talents and everything that they have individually to the maximum possible? All these are things that actually schools do. But at the same time, while they are doing all these things, if you look around the world, we see things which are very disturbing. Look at what is happening in the world. Actually, what is happening? We see environmental collapse, global warming. We've just had this terrible disaster in Uttarakhand. And we must ask, where has this come from? Is it just by some accident, an act of God, so to speak, or is it something which has emanated from us? What does it have to do with school education? Then we see the world consumed by consumerism. We have the consumption at record levels. We are lost in entertainment, virtual reality. You know, the whole business of you can say the industry of entertainment is at an all-time high right now. What does this tell us about ourselves? Then looking around the world, we see a tremendous resurgence of authoritarian governments everywhere, all over the world. So, in so many different countries, authoritarian powers are beginning to assert themselves, and they are taking away individual liberties. And why? We have to ask, are we doing this? We also at the same time see this tremendous surge of fundamentalism, of nationalism, of identity politics, tremendous concern with identity. And then a very modern phenomenon which has come about with the result of Facebook and Twitter and so on, the phenomenon of echo chambers, where you end up in an echo chamber and essentially keep hearing your own voice, only opinions that exactly match your own. And this has become a very serious problem in today's world, because it is accentuating the divisions that are there between human beings. And then this phenomenon of fake news. And finally, in our economies, the gap between the rich and the poor is becoming absolutely intolerable. The amount of wealth that is concentrated in the top 1% of the population. So I ask again, does this have anything to do with school? Is it that schools say this has nothing to do with us? Or it does have something to do with school. It has something to do with the values that people have. So we have to ask this question. Basically, we have to ask, where do problems come from? Are they the result of some bad people, and we just have to get rid of those bad people, and then the problems of society are solved? It's not obviously as simple as that. We have to ask, how do problems originate? What sustains those problems? No matter what we do, they seem to get sustained year after year, decade after decade. How do they get their vitality? So unless we comprehend all these matters, problems are not going to get solved, which means that we have to look at the origin, the central aspect of our education system. And if you look at what's our response to problems, how do we respond to problems? If they are discipline problems, we respond through police action, or we respond through laws, or we respond through the Constitution. We hope that by appealing to the Constitution, problems are going to get solved. Basically, all these solutions are of what you might call social engineering, where you sort of apply a force in one direction and get an effect somewhere else. Apply greater force, get a greater effect. Everything is in this mechanical engineering kind of a model applied to society. That has been the approach for a very, very long time now. Everything through laws and so on. It's what I might call playing with the outer of human beings. For example, reward and punishment, which is a central aspect of schooling everywhere. Is this the only way forward? The problem is that by tinkering with these outer aspects, we never really touch the core of problems. And is it possible in an education system to touch that core? Here's a quote from the famous physicist David Bohm, who was a close associate of Krishnamurti's and also a close associate of Albert Einstein. In fact, he did some path-breaking work in quantum mechanics. And he had a very wide-ranging interest in not only in mathematics and physics, but also in religion. He was very close to the Dalai Lama, in fact. So he's written out here, We are faced with a breakdown of general social order and human values that threatens stability throughout the world. Existing knowledge cannot meet this challenge. Something much deeper is needed, a completely new approach. I am suggesting that the very means by which we try to solve our problems is the problem, which is a very deep statement. And if that is the case, you might wonder then what is the hope for us? In fact, the only hope lies in looking at our schools. Let's look at traditional aims of education. What are they? As I just had a slide a few minutes back on what is accomplished through schools. Well, what are the traditional aims? One is acquiring knowledge and skills to function effectively in society. Naturally, we need knowledge. We need a number of skills. For example, we need to know how to read, to write, to reason correctly, to calculate correctly. We need to know how to do public speaking and so on. There's a number of skills which you can add. By themselves, knowledge and skills are neutral. They don't cause any problems. We can have as many skills as we need, as we want. Similarly, with knowledge. But we human beings are not neutral. So let's see what happens. We are complicated people. We don't just stop at acquiring skills and knowledge. We have a desire for security. We have the urge to power. We have the urge to dominate other people. We have the urge to possess things which are not our own. We have the urge to conquer. We fall in love with our own skills, with our own knowledge. We become narcissistic. And what's the result? A terrible exploitation of man and nature. We exploit man, and you can see the results happening all around the world. Wars, migrants, just terrible things are happening if you look at. And of course, you look at nature, what we are doing to nature, not only in India, but every part of the world. Here's a quote from Martin Luther King, which I think is very important. He says, it's from 1948, a talk that he gave. The function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove to be the greatest menace to society. The most dangerous criminal may be the man gifted with reason, but with no morals. Now he's put it in a slightly, using slightly old-fashioned language, but it's very important, what he's communicating here. Because is that what is happening in our schools? We are bringing out children who may be extremely gifted, extremely competent in terms of their skills and techniques. But what lies at the core of that human being? So now I'm going to introduce you to what J. Krishnamurti has said about education. The next several slides, you'll see many quotes from his writings, and I'll try to give a bit of a commentary on what he has written. So from this book called The Education and Significance of Life, he writes, "The ignorant man is not the unlearned, but he who does not know himself." Then he adds, "Understanding comes only through self-knowledge, which is the awareness of one's total psychological process." So his whole focus is on self-knowledge here. Thus, education in the true sense is the understanding of oneself. We'll come back to this because it's going to be a theme which repeats all through. What we now call education is a matter of accumulating knowledge from books. Such education offers a subtle form of escape from ourselves. And like all escapes, it ultimately creates misery. Conflict results from wrong relationship with people, with things, and with ideas. Until we understand that relationship and alter it, gathering facts and acquiring skills can only lead to chaos and destruction. Just to say something about some of the things written out here, what does it mean to have wrong relationship with people, with things, and with ideas? With people, we all know what it means to have wrong relationship. we exploit people, we use people. There's very little respect perhaps in the modern world. But also we may have wrong relationship with things, with property. For example, with land. Why do we imagine that we can own land? Why do we imagine that we can own a forest? And the way we use things, the way our relationship with our possessions, and similarly with ideas, unless we ask these questions, ultimately they begin to spin out of control. And perhaps that's what's happening in the modern world today. I'm going to continue. We send children to school to learn some technique by which they can earn a livelihood. Right? That's fairly obvious. But does the cultivation of a technique enable us to understand ourselves? While it is necessary to know how to read and to write and to learn some profession, will technique give us the capacity to understand life? Technique is secondary. If technique is the only thing we are striving for, we are denying the greater part of life. Because life is vast. Life is pain. Life is joy. It's beauty. It's ugliness. It's love. And when we understand it as a whole, that understanding creates its own technique. But technique can never bring about its own creative understanding. Please, some of these things may look a bit new if you have not seen these earlier. So I hope you will throw some questions at me after I finish. Present day education is a failure because it has overemphasized technique. In overemphasizing technique, we destroy man. Technique without self-understanding leads to ruthlessness, which we cover with pleasant sounding phrases. Our technical progress is fantastic, but it has only increased our powers of destroying one another. Just think of it. Look at the extraordinary things that we can do. We can send people to the moon. We can send our instruments to the other end of the solar system. Think of that Voyager mission, which is now at the outer edges of the solar system, way out somewhere, billions of miles away. We have the capacity to create artificial intelligence. Our technological skills are unbelievable. But at the same time, look at what's happening in the world, the degree of exploitation that we have, what we are doing to our forests, what we are doing to people. How can it be that these two things can coexist? Such great capacity in one area and such primitivity in another area. How is that possible? What does school have to do with this? To me, it's a central question which a school has to address. So can there be a different starting point for education? It is becoming more and more important in a world that is destructive that there should be an oasis where one can learn a way of living that is whole and sane and intelligent. A school is a place where one learns about the totality of life. Academic excellence is absolutely necessary, but a school must include much more than that. It is a place where teachers and students must explore not only the world of knowledge, but also themselves, also their own actions. From this, they begin to discover their conditioning and how it distorts their thinking. This conditioning is the self to which such terrible importance is given. What is this conditioning? I'll just say a couple of lines about it. Conditioning is all the things that we carry with us and never question. It's all our attitudes, our prejudices, our caste prejudices, our religious prejudices, our nationalistic prejudices. We simply assume that they are there and we build our lives on these things. And we never question them. We don't question why they are there. We don't question their place in our life. Look at what's happening in the country today, how divided we are. Freedom from conditioning begins with this awareness. It is only in such freedom that true learning can take place. And it is the responsibility of the teacher, which means the school, to carefully explore the implications of conditioning. A school is a place where one learns the importance of knowledge and its limitations. This is a very interesting line. We are normally educated to believe that knowledge is the ultimate in importance, that there is no limitation to knowledge. But maybe there's a limitation to knowledge, not in the sense of more or less, but knowledge perhaps doesn't touch certain areas of life at all. It's a place where one learns to observe the world. One learns to look at man's endeavor, his search for beauty, his search for truth, and for a way of living without conflict. In our schools, it is our intention to understand the actual without any preconceived ideals, without theories or beliefs. In schools, one learns the importance of relationship, which is not based on attachment and possession. This is a tremendously challenging statement out here. We normally assume that in relationship, attachment and possessiveness are natural, and we accept them. And we accept with that all the things that come along with them, what effects they create in society. Attachment to, it's part of the wrong relationship. I remember I pointed out that in an earlier slide. Wrong relationship to people, to things, and to ideas. Attachment is an example of wrong relationship. Going on. From ancient times, man has sought something beyond the materialistic world, something sacred. It is the intent of this school to inquire into this possibility. You know, the word sacred has more or less lost meaning in today's world. Probably nobody even talks about it. If at all the word is used, that word is used in a made-up sense. You put together something and declare it to be sacred, some building or something. But can you actually discover sacred, which is actually the root of religion? Can you actually look for, not make it up, not make it up through your theories? Can you discover it through your own interest in life, your curiosity? And should not that be also part of schooling, to find out what is sacred? I'll give you an example of how Krishnamurti thought about education, because somebody once asked him, what is the significance of the teaching of history in the education of the young? We teach history, and we teach history as a subject where it's a story of kings and queens and empires and conquests and so on. And look at how he turns this question around to the very heart of education itself. If history is the story of mankind, the story of human beings, then both the educators and the young are also the human beings. It is their story. It's not merely the story of kings and wars. How can the educator help the student to understand the story of himself, which is the story of the past? If you are the educator and I am the young student, how would you help me understand the whole nature of myself? Myself being the whole of humanity, my brain the result of million years. It is all in me, the violence, the competition, the aggressiveness, the brutality, the fear, the pleasure, and then that occasional joy and perfume of love. How will you help me, the student, to understand all this? Because that really is the heart of education. Not merely learning the facts of what happened in which year and which century. That is also there. That's just the outer skin of it. But can we go deeper? So you will see from what all I have read till now, that self-knowledge, understanding oneself, must lie at the heart of education. But self-knowledge can only happen in relationship, because you see yourself reflected in your relationship. Your deep impulses come out when you are actually in relationship with the world, with people, with things, the jealousy that you feel, the possessiveness that you feel, the envy that we feel. the aggression towards people, or whatever we feel, the sorrow, it all comes out in relationship, which means relationship is absolutely vital to study. Therefore, education must concern itself profoundly with nurturing three basic arts. First of all, the art of seeing, then the art of listening, and finally the art of learning. Krishnamurti emphasized these three arts tremendously. And I'll try to say a little bit about these. To him, these three arts acting in harmony made up what he called the art of living, which, can you see things correctly? What does it mean to listen at your depth? So I'll say something in the next couple of slides. He says, listening is an art not easily come by, but in it there is beauty and great understanding. We listen with the various depths of our being, but our listening is always from a particular point of view, from our prejudices. We do not listen simply. There is always the intervening screen of our own thoughts, our conclusions, and our prejudices. But as you'll see from the heading of this slide, listening is what opens the door to relationship. And because of that, it is also the door to a miracle. To listen, there must be an inward quietness, a relaxed attention. Words are only the outward means of communication. To commune beyond words, there must be an alert passivity. Those who love may listen, but it is very rare to find a listener. It is only in listening that one hears the song of the words. And I think these words have tremendous significance in today's toxic echo chamber world, where we are only interested, we meaning, if you look at the mass of people around the world, we're only interested in hearing thoughts that echo our own, that match exactly. There's so little conversation, a respectful conversation with people who may look at things slightly differently. And I think this is developing what I've called here the cancer of isolation. And apart from these, I'm not going to say much about the other two arts because time is short. There's also the art of seeing, which means the art of seeing something exactly as it is, without a single 1% of changing putting any coating on it, to see something exactly as it is. And also, can there be the art of learning without accumulation, which is what comes through listening, through seeing. So learning is intimately connected with seeing and with listening, which means I am nurturing a quality of attention in which I'm completely in touch with you. Probably we have not seen the power and the beauty of such attention. I'd used the word miracle a little while back. It is such attention which we have to help a child to discover through schooling, through our relationship with the child, through nurturing. So I'm not going to continue much longer here. I think it is now close to 7:30. But you see, what I'm trying to point out here is that education is not merely teaching the nitty-gritty of a subject. I personally am a mathematics teacher, and I've gone quite deeply into mathematics. I love teaching mathematics, but I know perfectly well that mathematics is not going to bring about a revolution in society as is being asked for here. There's great beauty in it. And at the same time, that's not enough. We have to ask so many questions which are of a fundamental nature. For example, I have put down here, we have to ask, why do we have this strange attitude towards authority? Why do we love power so much? Why are we all so seeking power over people? Why are we so much in love with status? My having a greater status than you. I should be able to show off, flaunt my knowledge, flaunt my superior possessions. Why do I have this strange relationship with talent, that if I have talent, I become proud of it. I imagine that it is my talent. I am the clever person. But maybe talent has got nothing to do with me. What is proper relationship with talent? Talent is a gift. Can we take this great challenge at the school level of nurturing talent and yet having the right relationship with talent, in which we don't regard talent as our own, in which it does not contribute to our ego? What does it mean to live with simplicity? What does it mean to think together? All these questions need to be part of our education. What does it mean to love the earth? And here's a curious statement that Krishnamurti once made. The teacher must not belong to society. What does that mean? The teacher must stand outside society, which means the teacher must be able to criticize society. He is not part of the whole power structure, the status structure, the rising, seeking success, seeking power. He has to be able to critique society, and to critique it, he cannot belong to society. Can we as who are school teachers have that attitude to education? Which means we are really bringing up a generation of young children who will have the ability to really look into the heart of life itself. So I'm going to stop here. It's roughly 7:30. There are about 3-4 slides more in my presentation, which I would like to read out at the very end after I take questions from you. Praveen sir, I will stop here and we can take a few questions.
Yes.
I know that this is fairly, it's heavy stuff in a way, because it is not about a subject. Though I referred to history in the middle, it's not about how to teach dates, how to teach the course, the whole evolution of empires. In fact, that's part of the challenge of education. When I teach mathematics, can I teach mathematics from this deeper standpoint? Not only teach the beauty of the subject, but also so that the child has the proper relationship with the subject. We rarely ask that question. What is my relationship with the subject? Is it merely my talent, or is there something more? So let me pause here. As I said, I'd like to share some slides with you at the end. And all right, so I'll throw it open. I can close the presentation right now and then open the presentation again later.
We have 3 questions in the chat box, and
yes, please.
one of the first questions is one of the teachers in the audience wanted you to elaborate about the relationship with the subject that you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Am I clearly audible to you?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So proper relationship to subject, which means what is my relationship? Let's say I love mathematics. What's my relationship to mathematics? Is it that through the subject I am trying to become famous? Is it through the subject I seek to to raise my status? If I really love a subject, will I ever try to misuse the subject and use it to for example, to exploit you? One of the very difficult questions that we see in phenomena which we see today is when you are good at a subject, you use that expertise to exploit others. That's a very common phenomenon which happens in the world. And sometimes it may be exploiting human beings. It could also be exploiting nature, exploiting animals. For example, putting your expertise into killing animals, into the science of killing animals, or putting your expertise into developing weapons. This is an example of misuse of knowledge. I know that these are difficult questions, but if we want to ask what does it mean to have proper relationship with a subject, I should know, I should not misuse the subject. I should have respect for it and not try to use it to exploit you, to exploit another human being. You see, that's what is happening is when I have a talent, it feeds into my own ego, and then I start misusing my relationship with others. So if I'm very, very watchful of that, then I won't do it. So that is part of self-knowledge. Okay, so yes, please.
Yeah, there is a question from the chat. I'll just add to it, and then now you spoke about conditioning, and schools themselves today are, in a sense, conditioning camps, in one sense, and most of the teachers who emerge out of this out of these conditioning camps, in a sense, are conditioned themselves, and therefore it is they who are going to be transacting. And the question here is it possible to explore how a teacher can work on understanding his or her own conditioning and work with children on it? Is that a possibility
Yes.
that we should explore?
Yes, I think that's a very important question. It is a reality that we are all conditioned and we all come from the same ambient atmosphere. We come from, our surroundings, our environment. We are all products of the same environment. And the only thing that we have is our own ability to reflect on ourselves. We can be aware of ourselves. If I am really interested in understanding my conditioning, then I'm going to be very, very watchful in my relationship with you and see how the power transactions that happen between me and you, the way in which I try to, to dominate you, to exploit you. So if I'm very, very watchful, when I say I mean the teacher, I'm speaking in general. And I think that's the work of a teacher in conversation, in relationship with the student, and never at no point imagining that he is higher than the student, because as far as this matter is concerned, we are at the same level as student. I may know more mathematics than a student, but when it comes to this matter, we are actually all at the same level. And it's our own intensity, our own honesty, which is going to take us forward. Our own desire to understand ourselves. So in a way, we have to make use of the fact that we human beings do have one capacity which perhaps animals don't have. We can be aware of ourselves. We can reflect on our actions, on our motivations, on how we act, and that is what is going to take us forward.
I think the chat box is almost burning up with a lot of questions.
Okay, I can see a few, so maybe I'll myself, whatever I can see. So one person has asked about echo chambers. Echo chamber is simply a technical term. It's like in an echo chamber, what you speak and you keep hearing your own echo. Well, that's what's happening if you'll notice in social media. You gradually eliminate anybody who does not speak the same language as you, who utters different opinions through like, dislike, friend, unfriend, and you end up completely listening to just people who have the same opinion as you. And therefore, since everybody is reflecting exactly the same views, you will start believing it. And perhaps, for example, this extraordinary phenomenon which you see happening in the United States, where a huge fraction of the population actually believes that Donald Trump won the election. It's the result of an echo chamber. They're all repeating exactly the same thing, and they are convinced that it is so. So that's what an echo chamber is. Let's go on to a few more questions.
Interesting question, sir.
Yes, please. Can you say?
Yeah, there is a comment followed by a question where it says Krishnamurti's philosophy, if we have to bring it to a classroom, will take a lot of thinking and trials and experimentation. So could you share your experiences, how you could convert this philosophy into your actions inside a classroom?
Yeah, I will certainly be happy to do that. It is, in fact, a tremendous challenge. We have certain classes in the Krishnamurti schools called culture classes. We also have a class called a general studies class, which is there in the 11th standard. But basically, these classes are without, they are not with any curriculum, any syllabus as such. It's basically conversation oriented and to understand our own uh, relationship, to understand why we do certain things. If we have a bullying tendency, do we, is it that we simply get told don't bully, and if you bully you will get punished, so everything becomes a matter of reward and punishment once again. But can I understand my own impulses? Is it possible for me to be so attentive to inwardly that that I don't, that impulse sort of doesn't go forward? I'm so attentive to it that it stops. Hmm? That's actually what is meditation. Hmm? It's a true, it's a kind of living meditation, which is without any technique. So so let me.
There's one question that, yeah, there is one on, I think one of the points that has come up in the chat is that, people are talking about several of the aspects that you brought up being tied to self-actualization. It's essentially a hierarchy in the hierarchy of needs. So unless the basic needs are fulfilled, are we, I think the question that's being asked is, are we looking at self-actualization without, should we, how do we manage the two? There are certain basic needs that need to be taken care of before we can actually move to this level. I think that's the question that's
Well,
come up.
yeah, certainly that is true. If your very basic needs are not met, then all this conversation becomes rather irrelevant. But I think that's precisely our responsibility, because there are a large number of us in the country who are not at the level where our next meal uh, is not certain. There are many of us, millions. So isn't it our responsibility to go a little bit beyond and ask these questions, since we are not caught in that? And can we not, bring together that energy and change the society of this country? If we simply.
Lost him.
I think we lost him.
I'll just call him.
I think you're muted, sir.
Hello?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what exactly happened, but I lost. Okay, let me continue. I'm not sure where I was.
You were talking
Yes.
about
You asked about the hierarchy of.
self-actualization, and you were saying that if those who have actually reached a stage, should they not be thinking of these things? Yeah.
Yeah, I think those who are not at the level of, where we are finding it so difficult even to meet our needs for food and shelter. Isn't it my responsibility to ask these important questions? Because, there's this tremendous inertia in our country where things don't change at all, where everybody wants to do the same thing. We are all aspiring for, our more after status and after power and after this and that. Unless there is a sufficient number in this country, in this society that feels differently and that is willing to ask these questions, we are going to remain at exactly the same level for the next heaven knows how long. I think it's important that we ask these questions. And it's precisely because we are not asking these questions that there are people in this country who are being exploited. Why does exploitation happen? Why is it that if I happen to have some skill, I'm so ready to exploit you for that? Why should, why does exploitation happen at all? Let's say I'm clever. Just because I'm clever, I exploit people. Just because I have the ability to become rich, I exploit people and become rich. That seems to be the way of thinking. Why should we have? Aren't we going to challenge this idea, challenge this way of thinking? We have to bring about that kind of a challenge. So there is an issue involved out here.
Satish sir had a question, sir.
Yes, please. Unfortunately, I lost, I think when the call got cut, I lost the chat questions. So maybe if you can tell me the other questions,
Sure.
I'll take them forward.
Satish sir, you can go
Satish
ahead.
sir, yeah. Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the conflict, exploitation, inequality are not a new phenomenon. The human history is replete with examples of many such things. And I do not visualize a day when these things will simply disappear. Therefore, our encounter with such tendencies should be on a continuous basis. And that's a struggle. And I don't think we will achieve a stage where all human beings have no tendency to exploit or no tendency to dominate or to take the advantage of their own situations. Therefore, we have to strengthen the counterforces. That is the only way out, I think. I want your reaction to this.
Well, I would suggest that we need to take our challenge a little bit more in a different direction. Why cannot we, you see, let's not imagine a futuristic, perfect state. That state is not going to come about if that movement towards that state does not happen. And I think it has to start at the individual level, the individual school level, in which we are asking questions. Can we see to it that the children who go out from our school have the right relationship to their talent, have the right relationship to their own wealth? If they happen to have wealth, can they have the right relationship to that wealth? I think we have to work at that level. Why do we feel that it is impossible? We cannot suddenly transform the whole world. It should be, get into some kind of it's pointless even talking about that. But we can start in our own world, that is our school, our home, and see what happens after that. All we can do is to live rightly, and that's all that is in our control. We live rightly and let that right action propagate through space and time. We don't know what will happen after that.
But unfortunately, the people who espouse the cause of liberation, we ourselves are chained.
We ourselves have to?
We ourselves are chained. We are in shackles. We ourselves are in the grip of those very exploitative values that are detrimental to the humankind. So unless the teachers who are supposed to guide the students for a better society are liberated from those values which are exploitative, dominating, I don't think it's possible to bring in a new value system in children.
No, you're right, of course. But then that is our responsibility, is it not? We have to take on that responsibility to see that we have the right relationship to things, to each other, that we are not caught in power struggles. That's our responsibility. We can't be playing a double game. We can't be saying that I want you to change, but I'm not going to change. I can't be telling the student that. Uh, Obviously, I have to do it. And I have to do it regardless of my circumstances. That is, if you look through history, where has change come from? Change has come from a single person who feels very strongly that something has to happen. Change comes only from a single person who feels that way. It never comes from a whole group which says suddenly, like a miracle, 1,000 people who say the same thing at the same time. It will never happen that way. The one person who feels strongly speaks it, writes about it, talks about it, goes to people, that's how things will happen. How is it going? Otherwise, what's going to happen? But one can give many, many, many examples of this kind. Let's take today a very topical thing, the problem of environment. There was this author called Rachel Carson. You may have heard of her, who has written this book called Silent Spring. A single individual, she wrote that book. After writing that book, she got attacked mercilessly by scientists, by industrialists who were out to destroy her because she was talking about ending the use of DDT and certain pesticides which were destroying our environment. She did not back out. She didn't make it into a war. She was not the kind who went around throwing bombs, that kind of thing. She felt very strongly about it, wrote about it, talked about it. That's it. That's all that one can do. And ultimately died for it. She got cancer in the end and she died. But I think that we have to ask, what is a worthwhile life, really? If is a worthwhile life simply holding on to false values, holding on to, just rising high in an organization, becoming chairman, managing director. We have made these things into such, as though they are something extraordinary. So part of education should be living with right values, discovering right values. Not that I tell the student what the right value is, but the student discovers for himself what is the right value in life, what is beauty in life, so that he and I together, we start living that way.
Thank you, sir. There are a couple of questions about the Krishnamurti schools.
Yes, please.
One is in terms of the number of schools itself. The philosophy has not been. We have not been able to kind of operate at scale, right? So how do you think we can replicate such environments, not the school itself, in the existing schools? What are the starting points for that? And the second part of the same question.
Let me respond to that, please. I think it's not that we must have many Krishnamurti schools. We must have schools where education is happening. We must have schools where there are teachers who really passionately feel that these questions need to be asked. And really the question which we need to be seriously concerned with is, why is there such little interest in the teaching profession in India? Why is it that people seem to regard teaching as the last option for what they want to do? How come we have these false values in our country? And what is going to end it? It's the same problem of status, the problem of status in society and possession and how much you earn, who is wealthier than you, all that business. And unless we have to be able to take a stand in these matters and say, I am not going to belong to that whole culture. I have to have the strength to step out of it. It requires a certain strength. It requires a certain clarity inside oneself to be able to take such a step. But that's how something great can happen in our country, if we are prepared to take that step.
The second part of the question was, in your own experience in the Krishnamurti schools, how do you get all the stakeholders on board? Like parents have their expectations, the education department would have their own, template that they would
it's an immense challenge. It's not as easy as anyone may make it out to be. We have, because that earlier question which one of you asked is exactly relevant there. After all, the teachers who come here are drawn from the same society. The students who come here are from the same society. So are the parents. So people may actually come to the school with all kinds of different ideas. One person may come saying he may have something in mind, another person, another something else. So it's a great challenge for us. Personally, in my school, for example, we organize certain study groups where we discuss these things so that we can together challenge each other and discover some of these nuances, these issues. But it's a great, there's no easy answer to your question. I would say it's like the equivalent of an open problem in mathematics. You don't know we just have to work at it and see what happens.
I think one of the things that you touched upon was about the need to focus on understanding oneself and one's own self. And the logic of it is quite clear enough that in understanding ourselves, we also understand the others and the other people. But it's easier said than done because it involves a kind of turning our gaze inward and going within ourselves, which doesn't come easily to people. So how do we how does your school, how does the Krishnamurti Foundation even approach this in terms of, because it's not something that can be learned, it's something that's more experiential in one sense. How do you approach something like
it's connected with what I just said. We have conversations, we talk about these things, we read things out from Krishnamurti or from some text. It's only by repeatedly looking at it that we have to keep that pot boiling, so to speak. We have to keep asking these questions. And we can easily, if we don't, you can easily slip into some state where you have some romantic idea of yourself and you can fool yourself. It's very easy to imagine that I understand myself perfectly, but actually I don't. So these are things for which there are no set answers. We just have to work at it. I'm sorry, I can't give you a more definite answer than that, but it's an ongoing process. That's all.
So one last.
We just have about 3 minutes to 8 p.m. right now on my clock. Can I read out that extract? And if you have a question, you can ask. But
one last.
I'd like to close with that.
One last question, and then we'll move to your closing remarks.
Yeah.
In your own journey, you started studying physics and then did your MBA and then the PhD and then came back into teaching. Why did you embark on such a journey?
Well, as part of that, I was just exploring the world, you can say. And I did my last bit of it, that PhD was in mathematics, and I still have a very deep love for mathematics. I spend a lot of time on mathematics, in fact. But at the same time, I did not want to devote my life to academic pursuits in the sense of publishing papers and more papers and still more papers and climbing that whole academic ladder. I felt that school education is what I would like to do. And somehow, even when I was very small, I had always been attracted to the idea of teaching at a school level. So somehow when I happened to discover Krishnamurti's writings, it all fell together and I ended up at the school level. Okay, so I'd like to share this last bit with you. Okay. So this last bit, a child in Rajghat school asked Krishnamurti this question, and I'd like to just read out this answer in part. What is the work of man? In other words, what are we here for? And look at his reply here. What do you think it is? Is it to study, pass examinations, get a job, and do it for the rest of your life? Is it to go to the temple, to join groups, to launch various reforms? Is it man's work to kill animals for his own food? Is it man's work to build a bridge for the train to cross, to dig wells in a dry land, to find oil, to climb mountains, to conquer the earth and the air, to write poems, to paint, to love, to hate? Is all this the work of man? Building civilizations that come toppling down in a few centuries, bringing about wars, creating God in one's own image, killing people in the name of religion or the state, talking of peace and brotherhood while usurping power and being ruthless to others. This is what man is doing all around you, is he not? And is this the true work of man? You can see that all this work leads to destruction and misery, to chaos and despair. Great luxuries exist side by side with extreme poverty, disease and starvation with refrigerators and jet planes. All this is the work of man. And when you see it, don't you ask yourself, is that all? Is there not something else which is the true work of man? If we can find out what is the true work of man, then jet planes, washing machines, bridges, hostels will all have an entirely different meaning. But without finding out what is the true work of man, merely to indulge in reforms, in reshaping what man has already done, will lead nowhere. So what is the true work of man? Surely the true work of man is to discover truth, God. It is to love and not to be caught in his own self-enclosing activities. In the very discovery of what is true, there is love. And that love in man's relationship with man will create a different civilization, a new world.
Thank you, sir, for the.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop this share. For some reason, it's not stopping.
It has stopped, sir.
It has stopped.
Stopped? Okay.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful
Okay.
session. But we do have a lot of questions which are yet to be answered. So I'll compile them and I'll send them across.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And we look forward for many more of your thought-provoking sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would be happy to talk more about mathematics perhaps next time. Okay. Goodbye and good night, all of you.